Excuse me while I draw a line onto your computer screen. In the immortal words of Jonathan Cash, okay, so fine. I've drawn a line. A line is a kind of emaciated rectangle joining 2 points in space. In this case, point A and point C. Where's point B, you might ask? Point B is somewhere over here, off screen, because point B forgot to bring their release form and cannot therefore take part in this video. Sorry. The question is, how did I draw this line onto your screen? How did I make all the right pixels light up to form that line-like shape? And the answer is... none of your f***ing business. See you later, yeah? If you're still there, I suppose I can tell you how I might have drawn my line.
Number 1. The horizontal rule.
HTML doesn't have an L element because if it did, people wouldn't be able to tell if it was L for line or capital I for I am a line. Instead, there's the verbosely and officiously named horizontal rule. Laddie f***ing da. The horizontal rule is a semantic element representing a
thematic break
in your content. For example, you might use a horizontal rule to separate the long rambling travelogue part of your recipe page from the actual f***ing recipe. It's arguably more helpful to use an H2 heading with the actual text, the actual f***ing recipe, but I digress. By default, browsers give horizontal rules their lineishness using the border property. You'll notice there's what appears to be a shadow cast by the line, which really makes it pop. But what the lamestream media doesn't tell you is that this shadow isn't really a shadow, but the effect of using a border style of inset on all sides of an element with no height. If you want to remove this thing that isn't really a shadow, there is a property for the horizontal rule curiously named no shade. The no shade property is what's called deprecated, which means you shouldn't use it anymore. Even though you can, like don't, but seriously go ahead, it's fine. But for how long? Now you're good, or are you? In any case, you can just restyle the border using CSS, make the border more permissive with border style dashed, or use pseudo content to label the points, shit like that. All of this styling we can do to a horizontal rule, we can just as easily do to a div. But there are reasons why div is short for divisive. Firstly, screen readers do not acknowledge empty divs, meaning screen reader users would be ushered from
blah 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 Sunkist rural Tuscany
into
1 tablespoon toasted sesame oil
without any kind of warning. Secondly, divs are not recognized by shorthand syntax like Markdown. Why should a content editor have to write div class equals horizontal hyphen rule close div when a horizontal rule in Markdown is just 3 asterisks?
Number 2. Scalable vector graphics.
Scalable vector graphics, or SVG, are named for their incorporation of graphics that are scalable on account of them being vectors. Like HTML, they are a kind of markup, and because they can be embedded into HTML, they are a kind of markup that is kind of a part of a kind of markup. SVG offers a number of ways to draw lines. If you are interested in being obtuse, you could use a rect element with a height of 1. Naturally, the name rect is short for rectangle, from the Latin etymology
rectum.
A more on-the-nose approach would be to use the line element with its x1, y1, x2 and y2 attributes. These lines are only ever straight, or at least that's what they tell themselves. To make your line change direction and create corners, you want polyline, which takes a set of points. By far the most powerful and versatile line thingy in SVG is the path. The path's D attribute, which stands for dim points, can include special commands like M. The M command lets you start a new line using the same path, beginning at a different position.
Monk.
Monk is a word that starts with M, which is pertinent here because a group of monks from the 12th century, presumably in the early hours before they got p***ed up on monastic beer, invented a numbering system wherein every number between 0 and 9999 can be represented by a single character made of lines. That rhymes. Using paths, I can quickly and efficiently recreate the first 9 monk numbers in SVG. For multiples of 10, I simply take the multiples of 1, reuse the paths with a use element, but flip them horizontally and transform them using scale and translate. For multiples of 100, I flip vertically, and for multiples of 1000, I flip both horizontally and vertically. Now to recreate any number between 1 and 9999, I just need to reference each component by ID inside another SVG. In this case, the number is 6969.
Nice. Nice.
Should you need to calculate the length of your path, you have a couple of options. 1. Try to recall all the trigonometric functions you were taught at school, which would be futile because you weren't actually listening, were you? Or 2. Use the built-in getTotalLength method of the SVG geometry element interface, which does all of this for you, thereby coddling you and destroying your capacity for independent thought. The value returned is not in pixels, but user units, the units you use to draw the path relative to the view box. One thing this is useful for is knowing how large one of 2 adjacent circles can be before it starts touching another circle. Step 1, or possibly step 0, in a circle packing routine you might use to create a basic generative artwork. Using the special commands C, S, Q, T, and A, you can curve your paths too. Exacting curves is difficult, but there are some hacks. For example, if I take this zigzag path and stick an S before my second point, I go from zigzagger to squiggler in a second. Each curve the S command produces is a mirror of the previous curve, hence the total annihilation of pointy bits. It should be no surprise then that the S stands for smooth, as in operators, baby's bottoms, and jazz. Combine curves with fills and you can draw pretty much anything with a single path element. For example, this picture of Bobby Hill from King of the Hill as the goat deity Baphomet with the inscription "That's my purse! I don't know you!" in Gothic script. Here is another single path, this time illustrating a skull. When you include a skull in your artwork, it is sometimes known as a
memento mori,
a convenient reminder that you will at some point die. If you're not an art lover, you can instead set up daily notifications with a calendar app. The point is though, right, that by converting the D string into an array, mapping it and randomizing the integers, I could use this image to create randomized glitchy artifacts, which is also fun to do.
Number 3. UTF-8 encoded SVG background images.
If you're a pervert for HTTP requests, you can of course grab a ropey JPEG image of a line and set it as a background image. The more cultured among you might prefer to use a UTF-8 encoded SVG data URL. All we need is a 1x1 SVG with a filled rect element. Drawing a line just requires repeating the SVG in one direction and setting the width of the line using background size. We can even make it a dotted line by with the view box. Now the image is twice as wide as the rect inside it, leaving gaps. Repeat this SVG in both directions and
me with a Pez dispenser.
We've got stripes. If you were to include your UTF-8 encoded SVG data URL in the context of a CSS in JS tool like styled components, and if you were to include an inline style on that SVG, technically you would be writing
CSS in SVG and CSS in JS,
which is 3 orders of galaxy brain higher than mere CSS in JS.
Number 4. Linear gradients.
As versatile as this simple SVG is, one thing you can't easily do is rotate the background to make diagonal stripes. But you can achieve this effect with gradients. Unlike with data URLs, which are strings, we can now interpolate custom properties, giving us easy control over the stripe dimensions and colours. Note that line end is a kind of reactive property. When you change either line gap or line width, its value is automatically updated. JavaScript doesn't do this reactive thing out of the box. You need a library like React instead. That's because, unlike CSS, it is not really a grown-up programming language. #shade, #t, ##### number.
Number 5. Houdini Paint Workloads.
Harry Houdini was a famous magician and illusionist who tragically died when he cast a spell on his internal organs and made them disappear. Jerry Houdini, no relation, was a famous technologist who created a number of methods for writing CSS using low-level browser APIs, who tragically died when he simultaneously choked on a honeydew melon and spontaneously combusted. A paint worklet turns any HTML element into your canvas, letting you draw on it like you would a canvas element. Drawing a line across the middle of an element using a paint worklet is as simple as defining the width and stroke color, finding the element's middle, then procedurally joining 2 points. We move to the middle of the left-hand side, draw a line to the right-hand side, equal to size.width, then apply the stroke. If you use a Houdini paint worklet to draw a simple line like this, not only will melon-adverse Jerry Houdini start turning rapidly in his grave, but I will write you a very strongly worded letter that will read something like this. Dear Mr. Poopy Pants McWrongbrain, it has come to my attention that you have enlisted a paint worklet and with it a JavaScript dependency in order to elicit a simple line artifact in your visual design when you could have deferred to any number of more efficient and well-supported CSS techniques. You are a complete and utter parsnip. Best wishes for the future. Hayden. P.S. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye. Before you use Houdini, you have to ask yourself, what can Houdini do that CSS can't do otherwise? One thing is having access to JavaScript's math object, which means we can use math.random to generate randomized line paths. What's more, by registering the custom properties amplitude and frequency, I can control the parameters within which that randomization takes place. Once these properties are incorporated into the worklet using the input properties method, you can start tweaking the values live in your browser's dev tools. In practice, I can use these scrollings to stylize my lo-fi mockup's lorem ipsum text, which not only looks kind of neat, but also saves having to explain to my client why the word come keeps appearing in their copy.
Number 6. WebGL.
Arguably, the pinnacle of over-engineering would be to create this simple line using WebGL, which, even just to draw a line, still requires things like vertices and matrices, shader algorithms, and the necessity to commit shameful, depraved acts like dynamically generating float32 arrays and stuffing them inside buffers. But whatever, this line exists in simulated 3D space now. You just can't tell because you're looking at it directly side on.
And summary.
Lines are rectangles that are really thin, unless they are curved lines, in which case they are not rectangles at all, but
squigglies, wibblers, and doodly-doos.
You can make browsers draw lines in all sorts of different ways. Always choose the simplest and most efficient way to draw the line for the given purpose or use case. The Baphomet does not, in isolation, represent evil. It is a composition of supposed opposites, good and evil, man and woman, light and dark. Eliphas Levi, the creator of this depiction of Baphomet, referred to it as the sabbatic goat. He did not invent Levi jeans. Some lines are decorative and others are meaningful. If your line means something, make sure that meaning is accessible to everyone, including those that hear rather than see what the line represents. The leading cause of death among males in the United Kingdom is choking on an unchewed melon. The second most common cause of death is spontaneous combustion, and the leading cause of spontaneous combustion is informing someone CSS is a programming language.
Hey, it's the interweb. Hey, it's the interweb. Hey, it's the interweb.